This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you in association with Barclays.
I think it's about going back to basics. It's looking at, what land is productive, what land's profitable anyway. I think it's about management, basically keeping that attention to detail, which is critical, I think, from planning right through to growing the crop and then through to marketing it at the end of the season.
Just how do we make arable farming profitable again? Why independent agronomy is becoming more popular, awards for women in agriculture, and what will land prices do in 2026? Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh. Broom.
All that and more coming up, but first, our top story. The NFU has made two of its top climate change advisors redundant, calling into question the union's commitment to net zero targets. Senior NFU advisor Jonathan Scurlock has worked with the union on climate change mitigation and net zero since 2007. And Kate Bannister has been leading the NFU's climate change policy, working on net zero for the union since 2020. Both their LinkedIn profiles now show they are open to work. It's raised questions because of the NFU's ambitious goal for farming to reach net zero by 2040, 10 years ahead of the government's own target. The NFU's 2040 goal was introduced 7 years ago by the union's then President Minette Batters in 2019. This week, Baroness Batters told me she was surprised at the redundancies.
Well, I have to say I was really surprised when I read it. And I mean, the comments in Farmers Weekly, obviously, about my proposal of beating the government target all those sort of years ago with Michael Gove, it was an absolute focus on ensuring that farmers weren't taxed in this area, that we maintain increased production, that, we've said all along we have to have the right financial investment, we have to have the incentives, but most of all we have to have the policy. And, I think the NFU's done a fantastic job with expert advice, working with scientists, with academics, working with farmer panels, farmers all across the country, to see how we do this. So we don't put the burden of cost onto farmers. And my whole focus with saying we can beat the government target by 10 years was to open doors that were locked to farming. And it did. It threw open all the doors. And we've been able to talk about farming being the solution, which it absolutely is in climate change. So I was just very surprised, yeah.
And this is the NFU blaming a lack of government ambition on net zero for these redundancies.
Well, there's been a lack of ambition across, I would say, the civil service, across all political parties. The legislation is there. That is the reality of this. This is legislated and it's in primary legislation. And we're the only developed nation in the world that has this. So the legislation is there. So we are on that road. So, yes, I would say all parties have been behind the curve. I think civil servants are behind the curve as well. But ultimately, we have to get through this. And, we have to have a policy and a framework. I'm really concerned about the carbon border adjustment mechanism. This has got to be about production and consumption. There's a real danger that our consumption of emissions starts to skyrocket. So I'd agree with that, but the problem hasn't gone away. The problem is there. Climate change is real, and we need to deal with it.
They haven't yet said it explicitly, but this is almost as though the NFU has ditched the 2040 target.
I can't comment on that. I don't know what their plans are, but the main point for me at the NFU was avoiding farmers being taxed, making sure we maintain our livestock numbers, and making sure that we can increase production. We've got to increase production, but decrease our impact. That is the focus, and that's better for the business. I mean, the whole net zero policy should have been about, do we want a better business? Do we want to cut costs? That is how you get to carbon neutral food production.
That's Baroness Batters on the NFU's decision to lay off two of its key climate change advisors, throwing the union's commitment on net zero into doubt. Now, in a statement, the NFU said it remains focused on supporting farming businesses to become resilient in the face of climate change and working with the wider food supply chain on the adaptations needed to mitigate the impacts of climate change. While the NFU holds long-standing ambitions for farming to be net zero and published its net zero ambition in 2019 to show policymakers what is needed at a strategic level to decarbonise agriculture, this ambition is not being met by policy development at a national or global level, said the union. Meanwhile, farming and food production remains challenging sectors to decarbonise. The NFU will continue to progress work on climate policy for farming businesses and support domestic food production. That's a statement from the NFU. So Louise, Hugh, the NFU blaming these redundancies on a lack of ambition by policymakers. Baroness Batter's not going so far as suggesting the union has ditched its own ambition for farming to reach net zero, but certainly voicing her surprise, Hugh.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, look, she makes some really good points in that audio, doesn't she? And I remember it brought back all the memories of them when she stood up at Oxford, however many years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when Michael Gove was minister, or DEFRA secretary, sorry. And, you know, the key thing actually that resonates, it was the avoiding being taxed. And I remember at the time saying, oh, there's going to be all these climate levies, and actually we need to get ahead of the curve and beat them there. And she was absolutely right with that. And it was a really ambitious target. And some people would say, oh, yeah, it's just a political target. Chuck it out there. It sort of keeps the dogs distracted with a bone over there whilst we carry on and sort our stuff out. And it's almost like we've now got to the stage where the dogs are still distracted over there too a bit, but they're starting to look back over the other way. And now we've just pulled the bones out the way, and they'll kind of run back on, and they might have a go at us. I mean, look, the bottom line is this hasn't gone away. The Scope 3 commitments of the supply chain and everything about the Climate Act, etc., it's not gone. It's still there. I get why they may have decided to jettison the staff members that were dealing with this, because they could say, well, actually, the individual commodity teams could deal with it. Get that. But it's just not a good look, because if you look at the rest of the supply chain and if you look at the rest of the industry, everyone is still busting a gut trying to fathom this one out. And it's probably not acceptable to turn around and say, yeah, it's too difficult, we'll just pass over it. Because actually a lot of it is doable. It just needs a bit of brain power, a bit of intelligence, a bit of a shove up the derriere and kick it on. And as we've always said, with the whole net zero thing, however you frame it, it's 98% of what you do in terms of cutting your emissions as a farming business, regardless which sector you're in, it goes hand in hand with good financial stewardship of that business, and it complements and works with the efficiency of that business. So, yeah, is it a good look? No. Is it probably do I understand why they did it? Yes. But actually, perhaps there should have been something a bit more in the middle, or just revamped it into something else, but didn't get rid of someone in charge of net zero.
Louise, NFU Net Zero advisors Jonathan Scurlock and Kate Bannister, both highly respected within their sector, a big loss.
Yeah, a big loss. I mean, this whole sort of net zero topic and climate change, and I mean, you know, no one ever said it was going to be easy, did they? But of course, we have got some legal targets. And as Manette pointed out in the audio, you know, farming can be part of the solution, well, especially productive farming. So, you know, it has been quite hard work for some of these people doing it. Measuring emissions is difficult, and how you report them and verify them is as well. But as Hugh said, it's doable. Great progress has been made. I mean, I've visited a couple of times and been really impressed and seen some of the work that the Farm Carbon Toolkit is doing. And you know, they had a 5-year project, which was Farm Net Zero, which was down in Cornwall. And, you know, when they really sort of applied their minds to it, every farm system saw reductions in emissions. So that didn't really matter whether it was a horticulture business or a dairy business, arable, beef and sheep. They all saw reductions, and they have, you know, those figures are all there. You can look all that up from Farm Net Zero, and those reductions were largely driven by falls in input use and things like more diverse rotations and healthier soils. So as Hugh said just a moment ago, it makes good business sense as well. Now, I'm not quite sure, this announcement that NFU has made this week, I'm not quite sure where that leaves everybody, but, most farms have, well, certainly the farms that I've visited anyway, they have made real efforts to bring emissions down and they have made progress. So that's a good thing. I hope we don't take our foot off the pedal on this one because, as I said, there are legal targets. And I think the whole point about the industry being taxed and everything, that will still be relevant if we don't continue to make progress. So we'll have to see who picks this up. I mean, the supply chain's doing some great stuff as well. So, it is doable. And I think people should just get on with it, really.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And now a special word with this week's podcast partner, Wayne Astridge from Barclays. Wayne, Barclays has supported farmers for over 280 years. How does that experience shape what you offer today?
Well, Johann, it means we understand that farming is always evolving. Our recent survey shows 77% of farmers are actively looking for ways to make their business more sustainable. Farm Transition Finance recognises the progress farmers are making by supporting those adopting sustainable and regenerative farming practices.
And what exactly does that involve?
Well, our Farm Transition Finance product offers term loans above £25,000. Eligible borrowing comes with a 0.3% interest rate discount, and you can choose flexible terms with finance from 1 to 25 years, fixed or variable rates, and even take a capital repayment holiday. Farmers can use it where it matters most to their farm, whether that's improving soil health, upgrading infrastructure, or diversifying their business.
And how does someone know if they're eligible?
The criteria is broad and based on farmers participating in one of several eligible schemes. Government grants such as Sustainable Farming Incentive, farm accreditations like LeafMark, or supply chain sustainability programs.
And what's the best way to start the conversation?
Head on over to barclays.co.uk and search for Farm Transition Finance. We're here to help farmers plan for their future with confidence.
Wayne Astridge from Barclays, thank you.
Barclays business loans and mortgages are subject to lending assessment, status and application. Terms, conditions and eligibility criteria apply. Security may be required. For information on how we're working to reduce the emissions we finance, including in high emitting sectors, visit home.barclays.com/climate change.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, how do you make money from combinable crops when cereal prices are so low and there's no basic payment? It's a hot topic and a question that was hotly debated by delegates at this week's Association of Independent Crop Consultants annual conference in Northamptonshire. I went along and caught up with agronomist Dan Matthews of Ceres Rural and asked him how we make arable farming profitable again.
Big question. And I don't think there's a silver bullet to answer that either. I think it's about going back to basics. It's looking at, what land is productive, what land's profitable anyway. A bit like we were doing when we were thinking about environment schemes and what we put into that straight away and keeping the productive land open to grow what is profitable from it. I think it's about management and attention to detail, which is critical, I think, from, planning right through to growing the crop and then through to marketing it at the end of the season. So, there are some other tweaks and bits around marketing and finding some niche markets, different crops. Diverse cropping is a big part of that. Maximising first wheat area if that's where the profitability lies, but try not to dilute any profitability in the rest of the rotation. So, looking at good partner break crops that are going to be profitable as well in their own right, and not just a break from cereals.
It's easy for me and you to talk about this, but it's a lot harder to do. I mean, not so long ago, when the basic payment was around, you could decide not to grow anything if the margins didn't stack up. You'd still have an income. That's not the case now, of course.
No, it's not. But I guess you have to just review that, especially if you've got fixed costs in place that you can't switch on and switch off. So if you are an owner-occupier running your own kit, employing your own people, then you are potentially committed to, growing a crop just to cover those costs and to utilise the machinery and the resources that you've already invested in. But if you are using a contractor, then, it's a potential that you can switch it on and switch it off, even if you don't crop it at all and fallow it. And I think we are on that cliff edge where we actually need to look at that quite closely, because, if you're not making money, then you are potentially losing money by trying to grow a crop on it. So,
and looking ahead to spring crop management and indeed spring cropping choices, what are you telling your clients at the minute?
Well, at least this year it's less of a big decision. So we've got more winter sown crops that look in great condition that we're actually quite excited about going and managing those crops going forward. There'll be some different challenges this year about holding things back. Nutrition probably will be one of the biggest things to start with, as well as the disease levels that are potentially going to be reflected by thicker, more forward crops. And I guess we are probably the first year where spring cropping and certainly spring cropping choices are less important because we've got such everything's gone to plan to date. So we're not really on the back foot. So that's a good thing. And I guess there are some decisions where we've got the legacy of SFI and we've still got potentially some NUM3 to use, and we're probably weighing that up against beans or other break crops that we would use in the spring.
It's not all bad news then?
No, of course not. No, but it's a challenge, and I think that the market at the moment, one of the big things that I've seen in the last 5 years is previously we've always talked about global markets and being beholden to them. But we've all seen in the UK that even domestically, if we've had a bad year, we tend to see a bit of an uplift in prices and protects imports and everything else. And we've seen that erode in the last few years, and that's the worrying thing. That actually we've seen, it's a perfect storm. We've seen a poor harvest followed with poor prices, and that's going to be critical. So it's just keeping that in mind, really, and trying to stay upbeat about what's coming in front of us, which should be some pretty positive stuff.
Dan Matthews from Ceres Rural, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, also at the conference, of course, was AICC Chief Executive Sarah Colrick, who told me that value for money and return on investment is increasingly important for growers when arable margins are so tight.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. I mean, it's always been for us the go-to for our independent agronomists, offer advice. They don't get involved in the product sales at all. And as the industry is going through a transition and costs are an issue, I think farmers look more to how the bottom line is looking, and independent agronomy can help them look at their cost and be more cost aware, really.
Today's been the industry day. There are 2 other days to this conference as well, which is for AICC members. What sort of stuff do you discuss?
So, the first 2 days are members only, and they value that opportunity to be together and exchange ideas. The first morning is always traditionally looking at our trials results for not only last year, but overlays of 2 or 3 years before and anything interesting that's come out. It's a hugely valuable resource for members. It's trials run by members for members, and we get a lot of support from industry with that, and that's always very popular. And then we tend to keep everything very technical. Independents, the way they work is that they are given the information and they interpret that data as they see fit. So, they're very used to that. So, it's wall-to-wall technical with a bit of fun in the evening, and we had a bit of downtime, and, just chatting to each other in the bar is all part of that. It can be quite a lonely job, and, they enjoy that opportunity. And particularly for the youngsters to be able to talk to members that have been, in the industry a bit longer, they value that, to be able to talk to them and, ask questions perhaps they wouldn't ask of their boss or colleagues, and it works really well.
Yeah, the social elements are really, really important. There aren't many conferences out there that are 3 days long, but people are saying to me that they really value that because of the solitary nature of the job. Crop walking, they don't. Yes, there are WhatsApp groups, but there's no substitute for eye-to-eye contact or one-on-one.
Exactly, and actually some of these members meet once a year here, so they could be miles apart. Some are in Scotland, some down in Hampshire, but they meet here every year, and obviously there's different weather patterns and different issues, but mainly they are facing the same challenges, and it's good to talk. And as I say, the youngsters get a lot from that. They feel they're not alone. And we've got our academy, which we do training through the whole year. So that's good. We've also started a new group that I've lead called the Emerging Leaders. So we're looking at future-proofing AICC, who is going to be active in managing AICC in 10 years' time. So part of the strategy is to get them involved and say, what do you want from your professional body? And it's great to see them. They're so, positive about the future, enthusiastic, and so we want to harness that and get them involved early.
Sarah Kelrick from the AICC, complete with a happy conference delegate whistling in the background. So Louise, a bright future for independent agronomy, but right now tough times for the arable sector itself.
Yeah, they are. They're horribly tough times. And I know we have talked about this before, and we've also said that we don't want to get stuck in a complete doom loop. But I think Dan's expression, it's a challenge, that just about sums it up. It is difficult at the moment. He made some very good points about management and attention to detail. And, we can hope, can't we, that a lot of these arable businesses will get slightly higher yields this year, providing we don't, have another drought year. And hopefully they will find places where they can cut some costs a bit. So, those are the sorts of things that people are going to have to be doing. I was very interested to hear Dan mention the topic of unfunded fallows, and this is something that I have heard a couple of times before. So, if you're paying a lot of money for men and machines, you don't really have the option, I don't think, to do an unfunded fallow. But as Dan pointed out in that audio, if you're using a contractor, you do have the ability to switch it on and switch it off a bit more. And, some people will be wondering whether unfunded fallows is what they need to do. So, yeah, some really interesting points. As he said, no silver bullet, got to keep your head up, and we've got to keep plugging on, I think.
And Hugh, when arable farmers sneeze, I guess the rest of the supply chain catches a cold, not just agronomists, but the wider industry too. Grain marketing and crop production company Frontier Agriculture this week announcing a big drop in profits for the 12 months ending June 2025, down to £9.4 million from £40 million in 2024. A huge drop, and that obviously doesn't include the challenging 2025 harvest.
No, look, it's tough, isn't it? Wherever you turn, will the rest of the industry catch a cold? I'm not sure. I mean, I'll be brutally honest at the moment, Johann. If you're feeding livestock, it's not a bad place to be, because obviously, at the expense of our poor arable colleagues, feed is cheap. Not great for arable farmers, not great for Frontier, and you can see that sort of collapse in those profits. I mean, it's not surprising, is it, given how flat the arable market is? It's hard work, and it's like everything. You've got to keep driving efficiency. I mean, it's the only way around this, or unless you're lucky enough to be able to sort of batten down the hatches, not have to service too much borrowing, and you can keep ticking over. But as Louise said, non-funded fallow, it's a new phrase, isn't it? It's a sort of Turnip Townsend thing they did 300 years ago when the grain was worth a bit more money. It's a new concept, but it's no good if you've got machinery to pay for, and if you've got rent to pay. It's really tough, really tough. And like I said before, this arable season is like no other in my career. And I'm only 52, so I'm not a completely old git, but I'm getting there. I can't remember any time. I mean, you've got to go back to the 80s, haven't you? When there was no direct support. So pre-IAX 93, when the old direct payments came in, the area payments came in, and they were crop specific at that time. There was price support in the 80s, and then of course set aside came in 88, and it's slightly distorted, but it bailed a lot of businesses out that were utterly hemorrhaging cash. But then when you look at the capital values that were required to farm in 1986, 1987, to grow a ton of wheat then, versus what you need now in terms of kit and inputs and labour, it's chalk and blooming cheese. So this is utterly uncharted territory for UK agriculture. And, ignore it at your peril in terms of if you want critical mass, if you want resilience, if you want production, there's got to be some form of rectifier in there just to keep everyone ticking over, because at the moment they're all heading one way.
You mentioned machinery, Hugh. UK tractor sales in December down to their lowest level since records began. That's according to the Agricultural Engineers Association. Louise, you went along to the Lama Machinery Show this week in Birmingham, Britain's biggest annual farm machinery show. What was the atmosphere like?
Well, the atmosphere was weirdly totally different, I think, to the reality out there, because it was really, really busy, and it had really quite a buzzy feel to it. But personally, I find it a difficult exhibition because I just find the layout so confusing, and it's very, very difficult to locate the people that you want to speak to. It really does take some working out. But, I mean, they must have been delighted with the numbers that poured through the doors. I doubt a huge amount of business was being done, but, you know, I'm happy to be corrected on that if they're going to tell me, if these exhibitors say, oh, well, it was absolutely worth us being there, we've never had so much interest in all this lovely, shiny new kit, then I'm mistaken. But I think people just went along for a day out, but very, very difficult at the moment. That's a, you know, and I think Hugh mentioned it last week, didn't he? Some of the discounts on this kit now are just unbelievable, really. So that shows the sort of year that they're all having, I suppose.
But fair play, though, for those exhibitors going there, because last year when we were there and we said, you know, things looked a bit ominous then with numbers where they were in terms of crop values and the way the support ship was turning. And we said, oh, yeah, this is amazing. You know, there's a real buzz here. People have really invested. These manufacturers, these supply companies have really invested in this show, and it's brilliant. And look, absolute fair play to them, and amazing that they've done it again. But the landscape is so much, it was bad 12 months ago, but it's so much different now in terms of, you know, where is the way out on this on arable?
Yeah, and I mean, this week we've seen, you know, the figures come out, haven't we, on the tractor registrations, and I think they're at the lowest since records began, new tractor registrations. So they started, keeping those records back in the 1960s. So, the number of tractors sold last year was they've never seen it so low.
The downturn not just affecting growers, and Sarah Colrick from the Association of Independent Crop Consultants making the point that good advice is even more important when times are hard.
Yeah, and she has got a point, hasn't she? But I think, you know, we all know, don't we, that there are good and bad agronomists on both sides of the fence, really. I was quite interested, though, to hear some figures, and this was just before Christmas, and there was a little bit of analysis done on what farmers had paid for fungicides in 2025, so the last growing season. And they divided them up between independent agronomy and distribution agronomy, or serviced agronomy, if you like. And it turned out that farmers were paying £3 a tonne less on fungicides with independent agronomy. So the average cost of their programmes was £86 a hectare, whereas with serviced agronomy, it was £112 a hectare. So yeah, that was quite a difference, actually. And I think that point about the capital requirement and the working capital needed now just to produce crops is absolutely huge. Obviously, risk has gone up quite a bit as well. I know there are some farmers who feel that the serious bloodletting, if you like, is still about a year away. Somebody mentioned to me the other day that, a lot of them will sort of limp through this growing year, if you like, but it's next January that they'll really start to unravel and feel the pain. I mean, obviously, unless something changes in that time, and we must hope that it does. But yeah, I mean, Hugh, spot on. It is uncharted. We haven't been here before. It doesn't feel very comfortable at all, and we've got to just, as I said, we've got to keep our heads up. And we've got to hope that things change, and that people find a way to survive this period. It will change, I'm sure of that, but I'm just not quite sure when.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from, whether you're out in the tractor, in the dairy parlour, or in the farmhouse kitchen, or even in the farm office. We'd love to hear from you. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can also message us by texting the word farm followed by a message to 88440. Louise, you've been out and about quite a bit this week, and not just to the Lammer event.
No, I have been out and about. I started my week at the UK Cereal Pathogen Virulence Survey briefing, which was held at NIAB. So the UK CPVS does a very good job, actually, at monitoring any changes in the rust population. So obviously they had a very busy year last year. We did see, as we've talked about before, this major varietal breakdown. One of the major resistance genes was overcome by a new strain of yellow rust. So they had a lot of testing and sampling to do. I have to take my hat off to them because they did get some information out very rapidly, and they kept farmers updated throughout the season. But Monday was the sort of wash-up event, if you like. They have it every year where they look back at the year that's been and what they've learned from it. And basically, this major breakdown that we saw, part of that was the selection pressure caused by farmers growing too few varieties. So we have got some very dominant varieties in England and in Scotland, actually. So when you get a major gene like YR15 breaking down, which is what happened, most of those varieties, of course, had it in them. It's in a lot of the varieties that are grown. So we did see this huge selection pressure, and we ended up now with wheat varieties that don't have the resistance to yellow rust that we thought they did. So it was an interesting morning to hear it all and see how many samples they'd received. The thing that I was left wondering after the event was over was, does the system need to change really in some way? Because, farmers were really left unprotected last year. The plant breeders were there at this event, and of course they've already done their work, received the money for the varieties that they produced. The researchers were there talking about the work that they do and what their new sources of resistance coming through. And of course, they'd already received their money, if you like, but it was the farmer who'd bought these varieties in good faith. And then they turned out to not be able to do what they thought they were going to do. So do we need greater transparency in the system? I think we probably do. Do we need better advice? Do we need more understanding of the genetic basis of some of this resistance? Because we can't really keep going like this, whereby the farmer has to carry all the risk. I think they need to look at perhaps introducing higher standards or something like that, just to prevent a situation like 2025 happening again.
And looking forward to this season, Louise, well underway, of course. We're in a similarly risky situation, aren't we?
We are, unfortunately. I think about 50% of the crop that's in the ground is vulnerable. The difference, I suppose, for this coming season is that we do actually now know that these varieties are susceptible to yellow rust, whereas last year we thought they were resistant to it. So we do know we've got to get out there, we've got to look, and we've got to act if we do see the disease there. And of course, varieties carry more than one resistance gene. So some of them, if you like, will be less susceptible than others, even though they have got that major gene in them as well. Worryingly, a lot of the candidates have got that gene in them as well. So, yeah, this is really where the recommended list system needs to come in, and they need to put some higher standards and just prevent those sorts of varieties getting onto the list in the future.
So, Hugh, while Louise has been out and about this week, I guess you're gearing up for the NFU election hustings, which are also taking place. NFU President Tom Bradshaw facing a leadership challenge from NFU Deputy President David Exwood.
Yeah, the NFU senior office holder election season kicked off last week, I suppose, when there was the declarations all done by the 9th. Tom Bradshaw stands as president again. David Exwood is challenging him for that. He's also putting himself forward for deputy president. Rachel Halos stands for, she's current vice president. She's standing for deputy president and vice president. Paul Tompkins, dairy farmer from Yorkshire, current chair of the NFU's Dairy Board. He's standing for Deputy President and Vice President. Robin Munt, who's been on council. She's Southern Regional Board Chair. She's been on governance. She's from the Isle of Wight. She is standing for Deputy President and Vice President. And Mark Jeffrey from Wiltshire. He's been the Wiltshire Council rep for a bit. He stood last time and he's put himself forward for Vice President. So those hustings start next week. So yes, we'll see what happens there, if there's much change or not. Time will tell, Johann.
Time will tell, indeed. These NFU leadership elections due to take place immediately after the union's annual conference in Birmingham next month. That's mid-February. Always a lot of focus on the top job when it comes to NFU elections. Tom Bradshaw facing this leadership challenge from David Exwood. But David Exwood, Hugh, also standing for re-election to his current role as NFU Deputy President. Is his heart in this leadership challenge, do you think, Hugh? Because it looks like he's hedging his bets by having a fallback position and standing also for re-election rather than simply going for the big job and asking NFU members to back me or sack me as your president.
I don't know, but you do think if you were going to go for the top job, you just put your name down for the top job and get on with it. But far be it from I'm just a simple local branch chair, so what would I know? But yes, time will tell in terms of what happens. So they do their hustings over the next week or so across it's obviously a simplified job now because it's just across 4 regions, and then they do another hustings at the NFU conference, the AGM bit. Well, it's the sort of elections bit at the end of the conference on the second day in Birmingham at the end of February. So yeah, time will tell. So there's plenty to play for between now and then. As to who ends up with which job. But look, the good thing is there's plenty of people, well, there is some people challenging. In the past, we have had bigger fields. I was going back 10 or 15 years, and sometimes we had up to sort of 10 or 15 candidates for the role of Vice President. I seem to remember the lovely Anthony Rue from Devon near Newton Abbot is the loveliest man, still farming down there. And I remember Anthony gave it about 2 or 3 goes, I think, Vice President. We used to have great, huge lines of people coming through the door. Not so many. I don't know why that is. Time will tell. But no, it'll be interesting to see how it hangs out. And of course, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you could argue that there shouldn't really be much difference between them. I mean, there may be. In terms of policy, because the policy is pretty much, if you're talking about SFI, you're talking about farming rules for water. We said last week that could there be a policy split between the current NFU position on IHT or taking the CLA position on IHT in terms of carrying on and really demanding a full repeal of it, et cetera, et cetera. The policy stuff generally doesn't come into it. It's more about the personalities and why these people are good. But perhaps, as we talked about earlier, perhaps there needs to be a real reflection as well in terms of what those office holders could do in terms of influencing the day-to-day running of the organisation and how to get best value there and keep everyone happy and keep the happy ship sailing along, as it were. So there's lots to discuss and debate at all these various hustings, and I would urge all the members to get along and take part. I think a lot of them are hybrid as well. Some of them, there will be some online ones. Most of the regional office ones are in person, but I think there's definitely going to be some online offerings as well in terms of hustings. So get involved and ask some awkward questions. It's always a fun thing.
Now, the NFU election's not the only contest going on at the moment. An important reminder this week, the deadline for entries to this year's Women in Agriculture Awards is fast approaching. This year marks the 3rd year of the awards and entries close on Friday, the 30th of January. Well, joining us now is Chair of Judges Chloe Ryan from the Women in Agriculture Network. Chloe, what are these awards all about?
They're all about celebrating women in agriculture. So we all know women have always played a vital role in agriculture, but on occasion they've been perhaps under-recognised, under-rewarded, and this is all about celebrating the work and the achievements that they do to help propel this fantastic industry forwards.
These awards really seem to have captured the imagination, Chloe.
Yeah, we had an inkling when we started this in 2024 that there'd be interest, but we've been absolutely blown away by the level of enthusiasm, the amazing entries we've received, the inspiring stories that have been told, and it's just building year on year. So yeah, we're back for our third year this year, and it's getting bigger and better each year.
And this isn't just about women running farms. The awards are for women right across the whole farming sector, before and after the farm gate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an award for Agriculture Advisor of the Year. We have an award for Sustainability Champion. It's about women who are farmers, obviously, but also the industries that help support farms as well.
Now, some people might say that we shouldn't have special Women in Agriculture awards, that in this day and age, women should be on the same playing field as everyone else. We don't, for example, have men in agriculture awards. What do you say to that argument, Chloe?
Women have always played a hugely important role in agriculture, and we know that. But we also know that often they've been under-celebrated for the roles that they've taken on and they've done a background. So what we really wanted to do is just bring those achievements to the forefront. And while it's true that women have become a lot more prominent in food and farming and in public bodies such as the NFU and DEFRA, we really feel that the response we've had to these awards and the network that we've launched in the wake of the awards just proves that there's a demand for places where women can celebrate each other and their achievements and then can carry on networking with other women afterwards. So it's really good that you've brought that up, Johann, because we've recently launched the Women in Agriculture Network, which is a year-round community built on the back of the awards. And it's an online space at the moment where we're hosting like webinars, masterclasses, ask me anything sessions with prominent women in agriculture. So it's really just a place like the awards where women can celebrate and support everything that they do within the world of agriculture.
Chloe, thank you very much for joining us here on the Farmers Weekly podcast. That's Chloe Ryan from the Women in Agriculture Network. And if you'd like to enter the Women in Agriculture Awards, simply go to nationalwomeninagriculture.co.uk. You'll find all the information you need right there and get your entries in by the 30th of January. And for more details about the Women in Agriculture Network, simply go to your app store and download the Stay Post app and you'll find everything you need again right there. Louise, you went along to the Women in Agriculture Awards last year.
Yeah, I did, yes. I have to say, I didn't go along as a nominee. I wasn't up for an award, but I did go along as a guest, and we had a really good evening, good table. Unfortunately, the person whose table I was on, she didn't actually win her category, but she was very well deserved to be nominated, and I look forward to seeing who's nominated this year.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it too, and good luck with your entries. 30th of January is your closing date, and we'll have a full report on the winners as and when they're announced in May. For now, though, Hugh, any winners this week on the commodity markets?
Thank you very much, Johann. Finished deadweight this week. Almost stands on. It's 0.4 of a penny in it, 647 dead. For the live weight, 371.6. That has dropped 5p. Many processors this week trying to, just claw prices back in terms of what they seem to be offering people. The sheep job, that seems to be steady away. 720.2, back about a penny on the week. The live weight, 335.8, that drops back about 7 pence on the week. The pig price is back 0.2 of a penny to 193.2. And on to the joy that is the arable markets. Now, what have we got? Have we got any? Is there any solace here? Not really. Feed wheat, 163.80. That has gained wait for this, arable farmers, if you are spot selling this week, you will have gained 40p a tonne. There you go. Milling wheat, £177. That stands on. Year ago, it was 210.30. Feed barley's dropped back after it had a bit of a rally last week or two. Went from sort of mid 140s, got up to 153.5. But this week, I'm afraid, drops back to £150.20. Oilseed rate 403.60. Feed peas 209. That stands on dead. Feed beans 205.6 or 205.60. That's gained £2 on the week. Diesel price, oh no, it's the number of the devil again. 66.66 pence recurring or whatever. That's gone up about a penny or so on the week. It was 65.2 last week. Obviously, with all that's been going on, oil prices spiked a bit because of all the stuff going on in Iran and the Middle East, etc. But hopefully it won't spike on too much.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, ongoing uncertainty in UK agriculture and indeed the wider economy has taken its toll on the farmland market, with fewer sales and buyers and sellers trying to work out which way prices are going. So what are the prospects for the farmland market in 2026? Here's Sam Holt, who runs the farms and estates team at land agents Stratton Parker.
So the supply has been down, and it's down about 10%. And how we analyse the market in terms of supply, it's probably quite useful to put it into context, is we analyse all land transactions over 100 acres in England. So generally in any one year, there's about roughly 100,000 acres that trade in any one year in England, which is about the size of the Isle of Wight. So we've seen about 82,000 acres launched up to September, and then we're just analysing stats at the moment to the end of 2025.
What sort of impact has inheritance tax had on the market?
It has certainly brought forward, I think, some people who were thinking of perhaps what's happening with the next generation of their farm. It has brought forward a few retirement sales for sort of smaller family farms where perhaps the next generation aren't farming, and they're thinking, well, let's sell now, enjoy a retirement. They haven't got enormous pensions, and let's perhaps pass a bit of money on to the next generation now. So there's been a little bit of that, but not a flood to the market whatsoever. I suppose it hasn't helped the whole market sentiment, but contributing to that not only been the IHT changes, which haven't come into effect until April 26. What hasn't helped the market is commodity prices. And it's influenced the sentiment of the market. I wouldn't say it's had a direct impact yet.
And why is that?
Well, we saw a huge amount of confidence come into the market following commodities going through the roof after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and that put a real impetus into the land market, and average values for arable land went up quite considerably across England. With the commodity prices creeping back, that has only added to the sort of the I wouldn't say a negative sentiment, but a sort of a more cautious approach to the market in some areas. That being said, this is just a kind of a generalisation of what's going on across England. There's some areas where land is absolutely flying out the door.
And what sort of areas are those?
So what we're seeing at the moment is Grade 1 land is incredibly popular. As soon as it hits the market, it sells exceptionally well, and that's generally driven by some well-funded and successful farming businesses in those areas. There's also some institutional money still looking to acquire that land because I wouldn't say it's cheap, but it looks good value in terms of what revenue can be generated, because there's some farming businesses in the locality who are prepared to pay some quite strong rents because they can grow some really exciting crops there.
And what sort of crops are they? Are they sort of high-value veg crops?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. High-value veg crops, potatoes, and daffs and calabrese. So yeah, lots of kind of high value crops where that farmer can afford to or can justify paying a big rent, and the institutions like that.
And looking forward to 2026, if you get your crystal ball out, what are you seeing?
I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of growth over the next 12 months, but there are some areas which sell, as I said, incredibly well, and people buy land for lots of different reasons. So I think average values will stay about where they are. They're at about £10,400 an acre for arable land at the moment. Pasture sits a little bit lower than that, about 10-15% lower, depending on the year. So looking forward, there will be, I think, average values will stay broadly static. But what is absolutely crucial to remember is that land has seldom been a short-term investment. You're not flipping it like buying a redundant house, doing it up and selling it for a profit. It's a 10, 15, 20-year investment, and there is plenty of buyers out there who are prepared to sit on it for that length of time.
Sam Holt from land agent Stratton Parker. So, Louise, Hugh, a mixed picture on land prices. Location always important, we know that, but the farmland market not in too bad a place given the uncertainty around the industry.
Yeah, location is obviously key. Land grade as well, although some people would dispute land grade, but obviously grade 1 land is flying off the shelf. It always will do and always does. The values, I think what surprised your contributor and surprised me was when he said that actually he was surprised at the amount of land that was coming forward in the last year was less than you might have thought, given all that's going on. And given, I remember in the summer when I went down to the West Country for some holiday time down into sunny Devon and coming back up the 303, it was just a sea of for sale signs in fields. Obviously, with all the tax stuff that was looming at the time and everything else that's going on, people were thinking about rearranging the furniture, as it were. So, it's a funny picture. But look, the values are there. And as he says in the audio, it's a long-term investment, isn't it, land? So it's not, we know that. And so I suppose that it quietly rumbles on regardless of everything else that's happening around it. But will that 10,400 average price per acre, in a year's time, as we reflected earlier, with the direction of travel of what's happening in the world of arable at the moment across the board, will that number be as high? Who knows?
Louise, that average farmland price, of course, masking the difference between arable and grazing land prices, something Sam Holt highlighted.
Yeah, well, arable land is, I think he said, didn't he, 10 to 15% premium over grazing land. It is a long-term investment, and of course that famous quote, isn't it? Buy land, they don't make it anymore. I'm surprised by the constriction of supply, and I thought there were a record number of farms and farmland coming to the market, but maybe that's, just with all the other debate that's going on about what's happening in farming, it's just seemed worse than it really is, because he's saying there's a constriction of supply. So there you go. These farms, well, they will continue to come to the market. People will seem to be carrying on buying them. So that's good. As Hugh says, will it still look like that in a year's time? Well, we'll have to wait and see.
Yes, that buy land, they don't make it anymore quote, widely attributed to Mark Twain, although no definitive evidence that he actually said it, like many popular quotes, I guess. Still, it reflects what a precious and finite resource land is. That's enough of that, though, and indeed that is it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. As always, we do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard and found it useful. If you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've really enjoyed what you've heard, as ever, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johann Tasker.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast was brought to you in association with Barclays.